Both of these cuts of beef have been aged for 21 days. Same cut, same time frame. This one was wet aged in a vacuum sealed bag. This one was dry aged, exposed to air in a controlled environment. So what's the difference? Most people would say this one looks normal, whereas this one, well, maybe it's seen better days. But the real differences go way deeper than what we can see on the surface. We're talking about fundamentally different biological and chemical processes that have been happening inside the meat for the past 3 weeks. All meat has natural enzymes. When talking about aging beef, the enzymes we're most interested in are called proteolytic enzymes. That means they specifically break down proteins. Why is that a good thing? Because the proteins they're breaking down are the tough structural components that can make meat chewy. Think of fresh meat like a tightly woven fabric. All of those protein fibers are bound together in complex networks. The proteolytic enzymes act like tiny little scissors, snipping those connections and breaking down the tough framework. This process improves the meat's natural tenderness. It takes what's already there and makes it better. So what are these enzymes called? The calpain system. The calpain system is like the meat's own built-in tenderizing crew, and it's actually pretty sophisticated. There are 2 types of calpain, mu-calpain and m-calpain. These 2 calpain enzymes both need calcium to work, but different amounts. Think of mu-calpain as the early responder. It kicks in with just a small amount of calcium and does most of the initial tenderizing work in the first few days after slaughter. M-calpain needs much more calcium to activate, so it works more slowly over longer periods of time. Both of these enzymes go after the structural proteins that hold muscle fibers together. As they break down these protein cables, the muscle structure is fragmenting at a microscopic level, which is what creates tenderness. But here's the interesting part. There's also a natural inhibitor called calpistatin that acts like the brakes on the whole system. And how much of that is present varies between animals, even between different muscles in the same animal. So here's the key point. Both wet aging and dry aging use these exact same calpain enzymes to create tenderness. Whether your steak was aged in a vacuum sealed bag like this was, or hanging in an aging chamber, those enzymes are doing their job. The tenderization effect happens either way. But where things get really interesting is in the flavor development. Dry aging creates chemical changes that wet aging simply cannot produce. As meat dry ages, it's constantly losing moisture, typically around 15 to 35% of its weight over a several week period. It's not just shrinkage, it's flavor concentration in action. When water evaporates, it leaves behind all the flavor compounds that were dissolved in that water, essentially concentrating them. Think of it like reducing a sauce on a stovetop. As the liquid cooks off, the flavors become more and more intense. But there's more happening than just concentration. As the meat dehydrates, the cellular structure changes, breaking down cell walls and membranes, which releases additional flavor compounds that were previously locked inside the cells. This controlled dehydration also creates conditions where certain enzymatic reactions can occur more readily, forming new flavor molecules that simply can't develop in the high moisture environment of wet aging. Now let's talk about mold. In certain dry aging environments, you'll see microbial growth of mold on the surface of the meat. It will develop a complex ecosystem of beneficial molds, species like Penicillium and Mucor, that contribute their own enzymes to the dry aging process. These microorganisms produce additional enzymes that are going to work alongside the meat's natural enzymes, breaking down proteins and fats in ways that create entirely new flavor compounds. Some of these microbial enzymes can penetrate into the meat, adding another layer of biochemical activity that wet aging simply doesn't have. The result is the formation of unique aromatic compounds, free fatty acids, and new flavor compounds created from broken down amino acids that give dry-aged beef that distinctive earthy, nutty, almost cheese-like flavor. It's essentially a controlled fermentation process happening right on the surface of the meat. In wet aging, the vacuum-sealed environment creates completely different conditions that favor a different set of microorganisms. Without oxygen, the dominant bacteria that develop are lactic acid bacteria, and these can also contribute to flavor development, but not always in a good way. They primarily produce lactic acid and other organic acids that can create a slight tang or sourness. So it's important not to think that wet aging is like a magic tool that will turn chewy meat tender. If left unchecked, it will spoil the piece. These chemical changes happen much slower than the changes that occur during dry aging because they're happening in a high moisture, oxygen-free environment, which limits the types of chemical reactions and flavor compound formation that can occur. So here's the bottom line. Wet aging and dry aging are fundamentally different processes that happen to use the same starting point, those natural calpain enzymes that create tenderness. But from there, they diverge into completely different biochemical pathways. Wet aging works in a sealed, high moisture environment where lactic acid bacteria can create subtle changes and mild flavor intensification, but if not controlled, can lead to sour or off notes in the final product. Dry aging, on the other hand, is an open system where moisture loss concentrates flavor while beneficial microbes contribute additional enzymes that create entirely new chemical compounds. The result isn't just more intense beef flavor, it's flavors that didn't exist in the original meat and can't be replicated through any other process. Both methods will give you tender beef, but only dry aging gives you access to that complex flavor palette of earthy, nutty, fermented notes that make it such a unique experience. Understanding the science doesn't really make one better than the other, it just helps you choose the right tool for the flavor profile you're after.